Tiffany's words hit me like a physical blow as she stood in my son's kitchen, her pristine wedding dress hanging behind her like a symbol of everything I'd made possible. "The best gift would be if you disappeared from our family permanently," she said, that plastic smile spreading across her face like poison. I'd seen that smile countless times over the past 3 years, but this time it felt different. This time it felt final. Brandon nodded in agreement from beside her, not even bothering to look at me while he delivered the killing blow. My own son, the boy I'd raised, the man I'd sacrificed everything for, agreeing that I should vanish from their lives. The kitchen fell silent except for the hum of the refrigerator I'd helped them buy. In the house my money had purchased, surrounded by the life my generosity had built, standing there in my dress clothes, having just spent the morning arranging flowers for their wedding tomorrow. I felt something inside me shift. The shift wasn't dramatic like in the movies. There was no sudden rage, no explosive moment of clarity. Instead, it was quiet and cold, like a gear clicking into a different position. I looked around the kitchen where I'd cooked countless family dinners, admiring the granite countertop I'd helped choose, the custom cabinets my down payment had made possible. 3 years ago, I'd sold my beautiful colonial mansion in Westchester County, the one my late husband William and I had lovingly restored over decades. I'd handed over $113,100 of my life savings to give Brandon and Tiffany their dream house. They'd promised I'd always have a place there, always be part of their family. Now, 18 hours before their elaborate wedding that I was financing, Tiffany had decided I was disposable. The irony wasn't lost on me that the woman telling me to disappear was wearing a wedding dress paid for with my credit card, standing in a kitchen bought with my money, planning a reception funded by my savings. "You heard her," Brandon said finally, his voice carrying that dismissive tone I'd been hearing more and more lately. "This is supposed to be our special weekend, and your negativity is ruining everything." My negativity. I'd spent the morning arranging white roses and baby's breath, the afternoon helping with last-minute preparations, and the evening listening to Tiffany complain about everything from the weather to the caterer's uniforms. The only negative thing I'd done was suggest that maybe we didn't need ice sculptures shaped like swans for $18,000. But apparently, questioning a single expense in a wedding I was paying for constituted negativity worthy of banishment. I studied my son's face, looking for any trace of the boy who used to run to me when he was hurt, who used to tell me I was the best mom in the world. That boy was gone, replaced by this stranger who could look me in the eye and agree that I should disappear from his life. "Where exactly am I supposed to go?" I asked, surprised by how calm my voice sounded. Inside, I felt like I was watching this conversation happen to someone else. Like I was floating above the scene, observing this woman being dismissed by the people she'd loved most. Tiffany shrugged, examining her perfectly manicured nails with studied indifference. "I don't know, Victoria, a hotelier sisters. Honestly, I don't care where you go as long as you're not here tomorrow." The casual cruelty in her voice was breathtaking. This wasn't anger or stress talking. This was calculated dismissal. She'd thought about this, planned it, decided that the woman who'd made her lifestyle possible was simply inconvenient. I realized that, to Tiffany, I'd never been a person. I'd been a resource, a checkbook with legs, useful until the moment I became bothersome. Now that the wedding was paid for, now that the house was secure, I'd outlived my usefulness. "This is my son's house too," I reminded her, though the words felt hollow even as I spoke them. Brandon cleared his throat, and I saw him exchange a look with Tiffany. "Actually, Mom, it's more Tiffany's house now. She's been handling all the finances, making all the improvements. You just gave us some money once. Some money once. $113,100, reduced to some money once. 43 years of marriage to his father, 38 years of raising him, 3 years of subsidizing their lifestyle, and it all came down to giving them some money once." I stood there looking at the man I'd carried for 9 months, nursed through countless illnesses, supported through college and graduate school, celebrated with through every achievement. This man was now telling me that my life-changing sacrifice was merely some money once. The dismissal was so complete, so devastating, that I actually felt myself disconnect from the situation emotionally. It was like watching actors in a play, except the play was my life, and the actors were destroying everything I'd believed about family and love. The transformation inside me wasn't anger, it was clarity. For 3 years, I'd been making excuses for their behavior, telling myself they were just stressed, just young, just adjusting to married life. I'd been accepting crumbs of affection in exchange for major financial contributions, grateful for any acknowledgement of my existence in their perfect world, but standing there, listening to them discuss me like I was an inconvenient piece of furniture. I finally understood what I'd become. I wasn't their mother or their family member. I was their financial enabler. And now that I'd served my purpose, I was being discarded. The realization should have broken my heart, but instead, it hardened my resolve. They wanted me to disappear. Fine, but I wasn't going quietly, and I certainly wasn't going empty-handed. That's when I smiled, and I knew it wasn't a nice smile. "You're absolutely right," I said softly. "I should go." The surprise on their faces was almost comical. Tiffany had clearly expected tears, pleading, maybe one of those dramatic scenes she could later describe to her friends as Victoria being difficult again. Brandon looked relieved, probably thinking this was going to be easier than expected. Neither of them realized that my calm acceptance was the most dangerous response they could have received. "I'll pack my things and be gone within the hour," I continued, watching their expressions shift from surprise to confusion. This wasn't how these conversations usually went. Usually, I begged for understanding, made concessions, found ways to smooth things over while swallowing my dignity, but something fundamental had changed in me, and there was no going back. I turned toward the stairs, then paused. "Oh, and don't worry about the wedding expenses. I'll be handling those differently now that I'm no longer part of the family." The look that passed between them told me they still didn't understand what was coming. I went upstairs to what had been my room for the past 6 months. Not my room, of course. I was never allowed to call it that. It was always the guest room, because guests eventually leave, and Tiffany wanted me to remember my temporary status. As I folded my clothes into my suitcase, I could hear them downstairs already making plans for the space. Tiffany wanted to turn it into a yoga studio. Brandon thought it would make a perfect home office. Neither of them considered that maybe, just maybe, they should feel some guilt about throwing out the woman who'd made their perfect life possible. But guilt required empathy, and empathy required seeing other people as human beings rather than resources. I paused at William's photograph on the nightstand, my late husband's kind eyes looking at me from behind the glass. 43 years of marriage, and he'd never once made me feel unwanted in my own home. "Don't worry, sweetheart," I whispered to his image. "I'm not going down without a fight." Sitting in my BMW X7 outside their house? No, scratch that. Outside the house, my money had bought. I pulled out my phone and dialed my lawyer's emergency number. Catherine Rodriguez had been handling my affairs since William's death, and she'd warned me about this exact scenario months ago. "Victoria, it's Saturday evening. Is everything all right?" Her familiar voice asked, immediately alert to the tension. In my voice, I told her everything. Tiffany's ultimatum, Brandon's betrayal, the casual way they'd dismissed my contribution as some money once. Catherine listened without interruption, though I could hear her typing furiously in the background. When I finished, there was a long pause. "Victoria, I've been worried about this for months, the way they've been treating your investment as a gift rather than what it actually was." My heart started beating faster. "What do you mean, what it actually was?" I could practically hear her smile through the phone. "You don't remember signing those additional documents, the ones I insisted on after you expressed concerns about Tiffany's spending habits?" The memory came flooding back. Catherine had been worried about protecting my investment from the beginning. She'd seen how Tiffany treated money, not as something earned, but as something that simply appeared when needed. The $113,100 wasn't a gift, Victoria. Legally, it was a loan with your name on the deed as co-owner. Tiffany never signed the acknowledgement forms I sent over multiple times. In the eyes of the law, you own 35% of that house. I nearly dropped the phone. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious." Tiffany kept forgetting to sign the paperwork. "And you were so focused on keeping peace in the family that you never pressed the issue. But the mortgage company has you listed as a co-borrower, and the deed shows your ownership stake. It's all completely legal and binding." Through the kitchen window, I could see Tiffany showing off her wedding dress to someone on video chat, probably her mother. She was laughing, gesticulating wildly, completely oblivious to the conversation that was about to change her life forever. "Catherine," I said slowly, "hypothetically speaking, what would happen if I wanted to sell my share of the house?" There was another pause, and I could hear the satisfaction in her voice. Well, as a co-owner, you'd have every right to force a sale. The other owners would have first right of refusal, of course. They could buy you out at current market value, and if they couldn't afford to buy me out, then the house goes on the market, and the proceeds are split according to ownership percentages. I watched Brandon appear in the kitchen window, opening a bottle of Dom Perignon, celebrating their freedom from his burdensome mother. No doubt, the champagne had cost me $400, charged to the credit card I'd given them for emergencies. Like everything else in their lives, they were celebrating their independence with my money, while simultaneously rejecting my presence. The irony was so perfect it was almost beautiful. Catherine, I need you to prepare a notice of intent to sell. I want it delivered first thing Monday morning. Victoria, are you sure about this? Once we start this process, I've never been more sure of anything in my life. They want me to disappear. Fine, but I'm taking my 35% with me. After hanging up with Catherine, I sat in the growing darkness, watching my son and his fiancée toast their future in the house I'd made possible. They had no idea that in less than 48 hours, their perfect little world was going to crumble around them. But first, I had one more call to make, one more piece of their fairy tale to dismantle. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I needed. Millbrook Estate Club had been handling the wedding reception, and, as the person who'd signed the contract and put down the deposit, I had certain rights they were about to discover. Millbrook Estate Club, this is Jennifer speaking. Hi Jennifer, this is Victoria Sterling. I need to speak with your catering manager about tomorrow's wedding reception. Oh, Mrs. Sterling, how exciting. The wedding's tomorrow, isn't it? How can I help you? I took a deep breath, savoring the moment. I'm afraid there's been a change of plans. I need to cancel the reception. The silence on the other end of the phone stretched long enough that I wondered if Jennifer had hung up. Finally, she spoke, her voice carefully professional, but clearly confused. Cancel, but ma'am, it's less than 24 hours away. Food has been prepared, the staff scheduled, the flowers arranged. I could hear papers rustling in the background, probably her frantically checking the contract details. I understand, and I'm prepared to pay the cancellation fees. The thing is, I'm the one who signed the contract and put down the $18,000-$200 deposit. I believe I have the right to make changes. More rustling of papers, and I could imagine Jennifer's growing panic as she realized the situation. Let me check our records. Yes, the contract is under your name with your credit card information, but surely you want to speak with the bride and groom first. This is quite unusual. I watched Tiffany through the window, now trying on her veil for what had to be the 100th time today, completely oblivious to the conversation that was dismantling her perfect day, piece by piece. No need to involve them. Jennifer, I'm making an executive decision based on recent family developments. I kept my voice calm, professional, the tone I'd learned in 30 years of managing William's business affairs. Mrs. Sterling, with all due respect, this seems like something that should involve the happy couple. There are 200 guests expecting dinner tomorrow. The happy couple. I almost laughed at the phrase. Jennifer, the happy couple made it very clear that my involvement in their lives is no longer welcome. So I'm simply honoring their wishes by removing my financial support from their celebration. There was another long pause, and I could hear Jennifer typing rapidly, probably checking with her manager or looking up their cancellation policies. Mrs. Sterling, I need to clarify. Are you saying you want to cancel the entire reception, the dinner service, the bar, the music, everything I'm paying for, which I believe is everything? You can confirm that with your contract. This is highly irregular. Mrs. Sterling, we've never had the person paying for a wedding cancel without the couple's knowledge. 20 minutes later, I was checked into the Fairfield Suites across town, ordering room service and feeling something I hadn't experienced in years. The satisfaction of taking control of my own life. My hotel room was quiet, elegant, and most importantly, mine. No one could tell me I didn't belong here. No one could dismiss my presence as inconvenient. And no one could make me feel guilty for existing in the space I was paying for. I ordered a bottle of their best wine, a steak dinner that cost more than Tiffany spent on lunch most days, and settled in to wait for the inevitable phone call. It came sooner than expected. My phone started ringing at 11:47 p.m., Tiffany's name flashing on the screen like a warning signal. I let it ring 4 times before answering, savoring each ring as a small victory. What did you do? Tiffany's voice screeched through the phone so loudly I had to hold it away from my ear. Even in crisis, she couldn't manage basic courtesy or respect. I honored your request, I said calmly, muting the television and settling back against the hotel's plush pillows. You wanted me to disappear, so I disappeared. I'm quite good at following directions when they're clearly stated. The country club called. They said, you cancelled our reception. Our wedding reception. Victoria. There are 200 people, expecting dinner tomorrow. The panic in her voice was almost musical. For 3 years, I'd listened to her complaints, her demands, her endless dissatisfaction with everything from the weather to the thread count of the towels I'd bought for their bath. Now she was discovering what real problems actually sounded like. I'm sure there are 200 people expecting dinner. That does sound like a problem. Your problem. I could hear her hyperventilating on the other end of the line. This is insane. You can't just cancel our wedding because you're upset about sleeping arrangements. I didn't cancel your wedding, sweetie. You can still get married tomorrow. I just canceled the reception I was paying for, you know, the one that was costing me $18,200. The silence that followed was the sound of reality finally penetrating their bubble of entitlement. Brandon grabbed the phone, his voice tight with panic. Mom, this is insane. You can't destroy our wedding day because you're mad about guest room arrangements. The fact that he still thought this was about sleeping arrangements showed how completely he'd missed the point. This wasn't about where I slept. It was about whether I mattered at all in their lives beyond my bank account. I'm not destroying anything, sweetheart. I'm simply withdrawing my financial support from people who told me to disappear from their family permanently. It's called honoring your wishes. But we can't tell 200 people there's no reception. Brandon's voice cracked slightly, and I could hear Tiffany sobbing dramatically in the background. You're resourceful adults. I'm sure you'll figure something out. McDonald's caters now. I hear they do quite nice parties. The sound of Tiffany's wailing intensified, and I found myself completely unmoved by her distress. 6 months ago, those tears would have had me rushing over with tissues and comfort. Now they just sounded like the tantrums of someone finally facing consequences for their actions. How could you do this to us? We trusted you. Tiffany's voice had reached a pitch that probably disturbed wildlife in neighboring counties. The irony of her talking about trust was so profound I had to bite my lip to keep from laughing. Trusted me? You literally told me to disappear from your family permanently. I'm simply complying with your request in the most efficient way possible. I didn't mean forever, she wailed, apparently expecting me to read her mind and understand that permanently actually meant temporarily. I just meant for the weekend. This was the heart of the problem right there. Tiffany's complete inability to take responsibility for her own words. She said things without thinking about consequences, then expected everyone else to manage the fallout from her carelessness. Ah, I see. So when you said permanently, you actually meant temporarily. When you said disappear from our family, you meant take a short vacation. My mistake for taking your words at face value. I could hear frantic whispering in the background, probably them trying to figure out damage control for their imploding wedding day. Brandon tried a different approach, his voice dropping to what he probably thought was a reasonable, adult tone. Mom, please, we can talk about this like mature people. Come back to the house and let's work this out. The house, still calling it the house, as if I had no stake in it, no legal claim to the property my money had purchased. The house where I'm no longer welcome. The house where my presence ruins everything. I don't think so, Brandon. Where are you even staying? Tiffany demanded, as if my living arrangements were somehow still her business after she'd told me to disappear. That's not really your concern anymore, is it? You made it quite clear that my living arrangements are my problem to solve. I could hear them arguing in the background, their voices rising as the reality of their situation sank. In 200 guests, no reception, and no way to fix it without admitting they'd driven away the person funding their fairy tale. Can you at least call the country club back? Brandon pleaded. Maybe if you explain it was a misunderstanding. It wasn't a misunderstanding, sweetheart. It was a very clear business decision made by the person who was paying for everything. But what about our guests? What about Tiffany's family flying in from California? The desperation in his voice was exactly what I'd been hoping to hear, not because I enjoyed his pain, but because desperation was the only thing that had ever motivated him to change. What about them? You're still getting married. They can still witness your vows. They just won't get a free dinner afterward, courtesy of the woman you told to disappear. Tiffany grabbed the phone back, her voice now thick with tears and rage. You're being vindictive and cruel. This will ruin everything. Everyone will think we're broke. Now we were getting to the heart of her concerns, not love, not family, not even the wedding itself, but what people would think about their financial status. Well, Tiffany, now that you mention it, I let that hang in the air for a moment, enjoying the silence as they waited for the other shoe to drop. Without my financial support, you probably are going to be broke pretty soon. That's something else we should probably discuss. What do you mean? Brandon's voice was tight with a panic I'd never heard before. I'd spent 3 years protecting them from the reality of their financial situation, supplementing their income in ways they'd never even noticed. The grocery money I slipped to Tiffany during shopping trips, the utility bills I paid online when they were a little short this month, the car repairs and insurance payments, and mysterious little emergencies that always seemed to require my help. I mean, Brandon, have you actually looked at your household budget lately? Do you know how much your monthly expenses are versus your actual income? More frantic whispering, and I could imagine them trying to do math they'd never bothered with before, because I've been supplementing your lifestyle in ways you probably haven't even noticed. The extra grocery money, the utility payments, the insurance, the endless little emergencies that keep popping up. Those weren't gifts, they were an allowance. And allowances can be discontinued at any time. The silence stretched so long, I thought they'd hung up on me. Finally, Brandon spoke, his voice small and defeated. What do you want, Mom? And there it was, the question that revealed everything. An hour ago, they couldn't wait to get rid of me. Now they wanted to negotiate. The transformation was as predictable as it was pathetic. I want exactly what you offered me, Brandon. I want to disappear from your family permanently. And I want to take my money with me when I go. The phone calls continued throughout the night, each one more desperate than the last. By morning, I had 37 missed calls and 41 increasingly frantic text messages. I ignored them all while enjoying room service breakfast and reading the Sunday paper like a civilized person. The wedding was scheduled for 2 p.m., and I found myself wondering how they were planning to handle the disaster they'd created. Would they cancel the ceremony, try to arrange last-minute catering, explain to 200 guests why there was no reception? Part of me was curious enough to drive by the venue, but the larger part of me was enjoying my newfound peace too much to leave my hotel room. At 9 a.m., there was a knock on my door. Through the peephole, I saw Brandon in his wrinkled tuxedo shirt, looking like he hadn't slept at all. His eyes were red-rimmed and desperate, his usually perfect appearance disheveled in a way that spoke of a very long night. Mom, please, we need to talk. I opened the door, but didn't invite him in, enjoying the power dynamic of looking down at my 42-year-old son from my position of moral and financial superiority. Shouldn't you be getting ready for your big day? The ceremony starts in 5 hours. That's what I need to talk to you about. His voice was hoarse, probably from arguing with Tiffany all night. Tiffany's having a complete breakdown. She's locked herself in the bathroom and won't come out. Her mother is threatening to fly back to California. The whole thing is falling apart. I studied his face, looking for any sign of the empathy or understanding that might make me reconsider my position. Instead, I saw only panic about the inconvenience I was causing him, not genuine remorse for how he'd treated me. I'm sorry to hear that, Brandon. I hope you work it out. The casual dismissal in my voice clearly shocked him. This wasn't how our conversations usually went. Tugel. His problems became my problems, and I rushed to fix whatever crisis he was facing. But that woman was gone, replaced by someone who understood the difference between helping and enabling. Brandon pushed past me into the hotel room, and I let him. Sometimes you have to give people enough rope to hang themselves with their own words. This is insane, Mom. Over what? A misunderstanding about sleeping arrangements. He still didn't understand. After everything that had happened, he still thought this was about something as trivial as where I slept. I remained standing, looking down at my 42-year-old son who was finally beginning to learn that actions have consequences. Sit down, Brandon. Something in my tone made him obey immediately, and I realized this might be the first time in years that he'd actually listened to me without arguing. This isn't about sleeping arrangements. This is about respect. This is about gratitude. This is about treating the person who made your lifestyle possible like a human being instead of an inconvenience." He opened his mouth to protest, then seemed to think better of it. "We've always treated you well, Mom." The lie was so blatant it was almost impressive. "Have you? When was the last time you asked about my life, my interests, my feelings? When was the last time you invited me somewhere because you wanted my company, not because you needed my help?" He opened his mouth, then closed it, his face cycling through confusion and growing realization. I waited, letting the silence stretch uncomfortably. "When was the last time you called just to talk? When was the last time you remembered my birthday, without Facebook reminding you? When was the last time you treated me like your mother instead of your personal bank account?" The questions hung in the air like accusations, which is exactly what they were. Brandon slumped forward, unable to meet my eyes, and I knew the truth was finally penetrating his self-centered worldview. "That's not fair," he said weakly, but there was no conviction in his voice. "Isn't it, Brandon? Let me ask you something else. In the past year, how much money have I given you and Tiffany?" "I don't know. A few thousand here and there for emergencies." His voice was getting smaller with each word, and I could see him starting to do the mental math he'd been avoiding for 3 years. $48.1. His face went completely white, and I watched the blood drain from his cheeks as the number hit him. $48,100 in emergencies and little helps, and just until we get back on our feet. That's on top of the $113,100 for the house down payment. That's $161,200, Brandon. More than most people make in 3 years. He was shaking now, either from shock or the dawning realization of how completely he'd taken advantage of me. "We were always planning to pay you back," he whispered, but even he didn't sound convinced. "Were you? Because Tiffany's been shopping for a Tesla Model X. You've been looking at vacation packages to Europe. Neither of you has mentioned paying me back even once." The accusation hung between us like a physical thing, and I watched him struggle to find a response that wouldn't damn him further. "What do you want from me, Mom?" The defeat in his voice was complete, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was talking to my actual son instead of the entitled stranger he'd become. "I want you to understand that I'm not your personal ATM. I want you to understand that kindness and generosity aren't infinite resources. And I want you to understand that when you treat someone badly enough for long enough, eventually they stop caring about your problems." He looked up at me with something that might have been the beginning of genuine remorse. "So you're punishing us by ruining our wedding day?" But even in his moment of realization, he still couldn't see past his own inconvenience to understand the larger issue. "No, Brandon. I'm protecting myself by stopping a pattern of financial abuse." "Financial abuse? That's ridiculous." The automatic denial was exactly what I'd expected from someone who'd been the beneficiary of that abuse for years. "Is it? You've conditioned me to believe that my only value to your family is monetary. You've trained me to expect crumbs of affection in exchange for major financial contributions. You've made me feel guilty for having needs and expectations, while you take everything I offer for granted." I sat down across from him, leaning forward so he had to look at me directly. "Yesterday, Tiffany told me the best gift I could give your family was to disappear permanently, and you agreed with her. After everything I've done, everything I've sacrificed, you agreed that I should disappear from your lives." "She didn't mean it," he said, but the protest was weak and unconvincing. "Yes, she did, and so did you. You both meant every word, and you know what? You're going to get exactly what you asked for." He looked up sharply, fear replacing confusion in his eyes. "What does that mean?" I smiled, and I knew it wasn't a kind expression. "It means you'd better figure out how to pay for your own lifestyle. From now on, it means you'd better hope Tiffany's parents are feeling generous, and it means you'd better start looking at apartments, because the house situation is about to get very complicated." "What are you talking about?" The panic was back in his voice, sharp and desperate. "I'm talking about legal documents you never bothered to read before your father and I helped you with that down payment. The ones that make me a co-owner of your precious house," I continued, watching the color drain from his face completely. Brandon stared at me like I'd just spoken in a foreign language, his mouth opening and closing without sound. "You can't own part of our house. We bought it. We lived there." The childlike logic would have been amusing if it weren't so pathetic. "With my $113,100 down payment, yes. Did you think that money just evaporated into the ether?" I pulled out my phone and scrolled to Catherine's email from the night before. But you said it was a gift. You said you wanted to help us get started. Apparently, my lawyer had different ideas about protecting my investment. Would you like me to read you the relevant legal documents? His face went through several shades of pale as the reality sank in. This is impossible. Tiffany would have had to sign something. Tiffany was supposed to sign acknowledgement forms. She kept forgetting to return the paperwork. Catherine kept everything on file anyway. I could see him trying to process this information, his brain struggling to adjust to a reality where his mother wasn't just a convenient source of money. You planned this. You've been planning this whole thing. The accusation was desperate, the last refuge of someone looking for a villain to blame for his own situation. Oh, sweetheart, if I'd been planning this, don't you think I would have done it before spending $18,200 on a wedding for people who told me to disappear? The logic of that seemed to hit him like a physical blow. If I'd been scheming, I would have pulled the plug months ago instead of continuing to fund their fairy tale right up until they rejected me. So what happens now? His voice was small, defeated, the voice of someone finally understanding that actions have consequences. Now you have a choice. You can buy out my 35% share at current market value, or we can sell the house and split the proceeds. The house was worth $390,000 now. 35% of that was $136,500. We can't afford to buy you out, he whispered, and I could see him doing the math, finally understanding the financial reality I'd been shielding him from for years. No, I'm very good at math, Brandon. That's why I have money, and you two are always broke. He flinched as if I'd slapped him, but the truth needed to be said. Your combined household income is $10,400 a month. Your mortgage payment alone is $3,120. Add in car payments, credit cards, utilities, groceries, and Tiffany's shopping habit, and you're spending more than you make every single month. How do you know all that? The question came out, strangled, and I could see him realizing for the first time just how much I'd been subsidizing their lives, because I've been making up the difference for the past 3 years. Brandon, did you think the money fairy was leaving cash under your pillow? The hotel phone rang, interrupting our conversation. Mrs. Sterling, this is Jennifer from Millbrook Estate Club. I have the bride's mother on another line. She's asking about reinstating today's reception. She says she'll cover all costs if you'll allow us to proceed. I looked at Brandon, who was listening with desperate hope in his eyes. That's very generous of her, Jennifer, but I'm afraid that won't be possible. Brendan started to protest, but I held up my hand to silence him. You see, Jennifer, there are some family dynamics at play here that make it inappropriate for me to accept payment from other family members for an event I chose to cancel. I understand, Mrs. Sterling. Should I tell Mrs. Blackwood that the cancellation stands? Yes, please. And Jennifer, send my final bill to this hotel. I'll settle up everything I owe for the inconvenience. After hanging up, I turned back to Brandon, whose last hope had just evaporated. Tiffany's mother was willing to pay $18,200 to save your reception. She's been planning this wedding for months, he said desperately. She invited half her country club. How nice for her. Too bad her daughter couldn't manage to be civil to the person who was originally paying for everything. Brandon pulled out his phone with shaking hands. I need to call Tiffany. We need to figure out what to do about the house. Go ahead. But Brandon, when you talk to your wife about our new arrangement, make sure she understands something. He looked up from dialing, fear evident in his bloodshot eyes. I'm not the same woman who walked out of your house last night. That woman was desperate to keep peace in the family at any cost. This woman is done being taken advantage of. You're really going to force us to sell our home? The question came out as barely a whisper, and I could see him finally grasping the enormity of what he'd unleashed. I'm going to exercise my legal rights as a kohana. What you do with that information is up to you. He left without another word, probably to deliver the worst news of Tiffany's life on what was supposed to be the happiest day of hers. 20 minutes later, my phone rang again. Victoria. Tiffany's voice was barely recognizable through her tears, forced from what had clearly been hours of crying. We need to talk. The desperation in her voice was complete. All pretense of superiority finally stripped away. No, sweetie, we really don't. You made it very clear yesterday that talking to me wasn't something you were interested in doing. I was upset. I was stressed about the wedding. I didn't mean what I said. Of course she was upset. It must be exhausting pretending to tolerate someone you obviously despise while simultaneously depending on their financial support. I don't despise you, Victoria. I was just ... But she couldn't finish the sentence because we both knew it would be another lie. In the 3 years since you moved into the house I bought for you, you've never once thanked me. Not once. You've never asked about my life, my interests, my health. You've never invited me to anything unless you needed me to babysit or bring food or write a check. The silence on the other end told me she was finally understanding the depth of her selfishness. That's not true, she whispered, but even she didn't sound convinced. When was the last time you called just to see how I was doing? More silence. I'll save you the mental effort, Tiffany. Never. You've never called just to check on me, but you're Brandon's mother, your family. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. Yesterday, you told me the best gift I could give this family was to disappear permanently. Today, you're claiming I'm family. Which is it, Tiffany? The crying intensified, the kind of desperate sobbing that once would have had me rushing over with tissues and comfort. Now it just sounded like someone finally facing the consequences of years of terrible behavior. Victoria, please, I'll do anything. I'll apologize publicly. I'll pay you back. Pay me back with what money? You don't work, remember. You're a full-time homemaker in a house you couldn't afford without my money. I'll get a job. That was a start, at least. That's a great idea. You should definitely do that, but it doesn't change the current situation with the house. What if we agree to pay you back for everything? All the money you've given us over the years. I almost laughed at the mathematical impossibility of what she was suggesting. Tiffany, honey, you owe me $161,200 at minimum wage. It would take you about 8 years to earn that much, assuming you never spend money on anything else. The silence that followed was the sound of reality finally penetrating her bubble of entitlement. By 4 p.m., they'd called 21 more times. I'd answered exactly none of them. Instead, I was sitting in the hotel restaurant enjoying a lovely late lunch and watching the local news. Coverage of a wedding disaster at Millbrook Estate Club. The reporter didn't mention names, but the footage of Tiffany in her wedding dress crying on the country club steps was pretty unmistakable. The sight should have made me feel guilty, but instead, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. The satisfaction of boundaries finally being respected. Excuse me, aren't you Victoria Sterling? I looked up to see a woman about my age, with perfectly styled silver hair and intelligent eyes. She looked familiar, but I couldn't quite place her. I'm sorry, do we know each other? Patricia Blackwood, Tiffany's mother. She gestured to the empty chair across from me. May I? This should be interesting, I thought. Patricia sat down with the practiced grace of someone who'd spent decades handling social crises. I wanted to thank you. That wasn't what I'd expected, at all. Thank me for showing my daughter who she really is. Patricia ordered coffee when the waitress appeared, then continued with a directness I found refreshing. I've been worried about Tiffany for years. The entitlement, the way she treats people she considers beneath her, the complete lack of gratitude for anything. I kept hoping marriage would mature her. She paused to sip her coffee thoughtfully. And now I've seen how she treats the woman who made her lifestyle possible, and I'm horrified. I studied Patricia carefully, surprised by her honesty. I offered to pay for the reception, not because I support Tiffany's behavior, but because I felt responsible for the 200 guests who'd been inconvenienced. But you were right to refuse, was I. My daughter needed to face consequences for her actions. Real consequences. The kind that can't be fixed with daddy's money or mommy's connections. Patricia reached into her purse and pulled out an elegant business card. She called me hysterical about the house situation, demanding that I loan them money to buy out your share. And I told her absolutely not. If she wanted to own a house, she should have treated the Kona with respect. A woman after my own heart, I thought. Can I ask you something, Victoria? What's your end game here? Are you planning to force the sale? I'd been wondering that myself, weighing options that ranged from merciful to nuclear. Honestly, Patricia, I haven't decided. Part of me wants to see if they can actually figure out how to support themselves without my money. Part of me wants to sell the house just to watch their perfect little world crumble completely. Patricia nodded with understanding. And the other part remembers that Brandon is still your son, despite everything. Exactly. May I offer some advice from someone who's been enabling her daughter's bad behavior for 39 years? I leaned forward, curious. Please don't save them from this. Whatever you decide about the house, don't cushion the fall. Tiffany has never faced real consequences for treating people badly, and it's turned her into someone I barely recognize as my daughter. She stood up, leaving money for her coffee. I'm flying back to California tomorrow. If you ever want to talk to someone who understands what it's like to love an ungrateful child, call me. After Patricia left, I sat alone with my thoughts and my phone, which was still buzzing with increasingly desperate messages. The truth was, I hadn't decided what my endgame should be. I'd been reacting, protecting myself, asserting boundaries, but now I needed to figure out what came next. The nuclear option was forcing the sale. Brandon and Tiffany would have to find an apartment, probably in a much less desirable part of town, and finally understand what it meant to live within their means. The merciful option was offering to sell them my share for less than market value, maybe just what I'd actually invested. They'd still struggle, but they might keep their home. The spite option was holding on to my ownership stake indefinitely, collecting my share of property taxes while watching them squirm every month. As I weighed these possibilities, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Mrs. Sterling, this is Detective Matthews with the Westchester County Police Department. I'm calling about a report we received regarding financial elder abuse. My blood went cold, though I probably shouldn't have been surprised. I'm sorry. What? We had a call from someone claiming that family members have been financially exploiting you and that you might be experiencing cognitive decline. They're requesting a welfare check. Those manipulative little snakes had actually called the police on me. Detective Matthews, I can assure you that I'm in full possession of my mental faculties. In fact, I'm probably thinking more clearly than I have in years. That's good to hear, Mum, but we do need to follow up on these reports. Would you be available to meet with me tomorrow morning? I looked around the hotel restaurant at normal people living their normal lives and felt a surge of pure fury at my son and daughter-in-law's latest manipulation. They'd gone from dismissing me as an inconvenience to trying to have me declared mentally incompetent when I wouldn't continue funding their lifestyle. Absolutely, Detective. In fact, I have quite a lot I'd like to discuss with you about financial abuse, just not the kind my family reported. After scheduling the meeting, I sat back in my chair and smiled. If Brandon and Tiffany wanted to play hardball, I was more than ready to step up to the plate. Time to show them what a real power play looked like. Detective Matthews was younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, with intelligent eyes and the kind of patient demeanor that probably served him well in family disputes. We met at the police station Monday morning, and I'd brought my entire financial file. Mrs. Sterling, I want to start by saying that the person who called seemed genuinely concerned about your welfare. I'm sure they did. My daughter-in-law is very good at sounding concerned when it suits her purposes. I spread my bank statements across his desk methodically. Detected. In the past 3 years, I've given my son and his wife $161,200. Would you like to see the documentation? His eyebrows rose as he examined the papers, check after check, wire transfers, credit card payments made on their behalf. A clear pattern of financial dependency that looked exactly like what it was. This is substantial, he said carefully, his tone shifting from skeptical to concerned. It is, and yesterday, when I finally set some boundaries about how they treat me, they decided I must be mentally incompetent. I pulled out my phone and played the voicemail Tiffany had left at 3 a.m. Victoria, this is insane behavior. Normal people don't destroy their families' lives over hurt feelings. We're worried about you. Maybe you need to see someone, get some help. Brandon thinks you might be having some kind of breakdown. Detective Matthews listened, taking careful notes. Has there been any history of cognitive issues, Mrs. Sterling? None whatsoever. I manage my own finances, maintain my own household, drive myself everywhere. The only thing that's changed is that I stopped letting them take advantage of me. I showed him the house documents Catherine had provided. My lawyer can verify that I'm a legal owner of their property. Everything I'm doing is within my rights as an investor protecting her assets. We talked for another 20 minutes, with Detective Matthews being thorough but fair. By the end, he seemed satisfied that I was mentally competent and financially savvy. Mrs. Sterling, I'm going to close this case as unfounded, but I do want to give you some information about elder financial abuse resources, just in case. Actually, Detective, I think I've got the situation well in hand now. 6 months later, I was sitting in my new apartment, A lovely 2-bedroom place in a senior community with a pool and walking trails. When Tiffany called with surprising news, "Victoria, I got the promotion." Tiffany had started working as a receptionist at a dental office, and apparently, she'd been good enough at it to move up to office manager. "That's wonderful, honey. How do you feel?" "Exhausted," she laughed, and it was the first genuine laugh I'd heard from her in years, but also proud. "I never knew I was good at organizing things. You always were, Tiffany. You just never had to use those skills before." There was a pause, and when she spoke again, her voice was different, softer, more mature. "Victoria, I owe you an apology. A real one, not the panicked one from Catherine's office. I'm listening. I was horrible to you for years. I treated you like an ATM and then got angry when you had feelings about it. I told myself you were just being dramatic, but the truth is, I was entitled and cruel." I set down my coffee cup, surprised by how much her words affected me. "What changed your mind? Having to work for money instead of just asking for it? Realizing how hard it is to save even $100 when you're paying your own bills? Understanding what you sacrificed to help us?" She paused. "And Brandon, he's getting there too. He still thinks you were harsh, but he admits we needed to change." Through my window, I could see other residents working in the community garden. I'd signed up to help with the spring planting next week. "How are things between you two?" "Better. Actually, we're talking more now that we're not constantly stressed about money. We cook together, take walks instead of going shopping. It's nice." "I'm glad to hear that. Victoria, would you like to come to dinner sometime? Nothing fancy, just homemade spaghetti, and maybe some conversation that isn't about money." The old Victoria would have said yes immediately, desperate to restore the relationship. The new Victoria had learned to protect her boundaries. "I'd like that. But let's start with lunch in a public place. Baby steps, of course. Whatever you're comfortable with." After we hung up, I sat quietly for a while, processing how different this conversation had felt. Tiffany had sounded like an adult taking responsibility for her actions, not a child making excuses. Maybe the lesson had finally taken hold. My phone buzzed with a text from Patricia Blackwood. "Heard about Tiffany's promotion. Thank you for not giving up on her." I texted back, "Thank you for not bailing her out." Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is let them face the consequences of their choices. Sometimes love means saying no. And sometimes the best gift you can give someone is the opportunity to discover who they really are when no one's there to catch them when they fall. I'd spent 3 years being their safety net, and in doing so, I'd robbed them of the chance to develop their own strength. When I finally pulled that net away, they'd learned to fly not because they wanted to, but because they had to. And maybe that was the most valuable lesson of all. Outside my window, the sun was setting over the walking trail where I'd signed up for a senior hiking group. Tomorrow, I was having lunch with a man named Richard who'd asked me out after we'd both laughed at the same joke during book club. At 68, I was finally learning what it felt like to be valued for who I was, not what I could provide. And that was worth more than all the money I'd ever given away. The story ends here, but the lesson continues. Family isn't about unconditional financial support, it's about mutual respect, gratitude, and treating each other like human beings worthy of love and consideration. When someone shows you who they are, believe them. And when they ask you to disappear from their lives, sometimes the best response is to honor that request, while taking your dignity and your money with you. Remember to hit that subscribe button if this story resonated with you. Give it a thumbs up if you think boundaries matter in family relationships, and share your own experiences in the comments below. Sometimes the people we love most need to learn the hardest lessons, and sometimes we're the ones who have to teach them. Until next time, remember that you're worth more than what you can give others, and never let anyone convince you otherwise.